My name is Suzanne van Doorn. I'm a blogger at mindfunda.com. Please visit my blog at mindfunda.com and it will give you a chance if you sign up for my newsletter to grab yourself a free ebook about mutual dreaming. I've done some experiments about mutual dreaming and you can read all about it. And you will get my newsletter with the latest news about mythology, spirituality and research about dreams. Tonight I have the pleasure and the honor of talking with Professor Stanley Krippner. Hello Stanley, how are you doing?
Good to see you again.
Mm-hmm. It's very good to see you. And the international conference for the Association of Dreams will start next Friday.
Yes, it will. That's right.
Yeah, I know you from the conference, and you are a big star because it's hardly impossible to talk with you there. Everybody wants to talk to you.
Do my best. I do my best to talk with them.
I know. I've read in the book that you have to have somebody around who has the ability to say no sometimes for you. I thought it was very cute.
Well, I'm very impressed that you found the book that my students put together and that you've already read it.
Yes. Recently, I had a dream about you, or my dream vision of about you, and you are for me an archetype of the wise man, and we were like a mudra. We were doing a ritual with hands together, and I was so glad because I intuitively understood what I had to do to be in tune with your energy, and I thought, I'm going to ask him for an interview because of that dream.
Oh, I think that's a wonderful dream.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Are hands important to you?
Hands.
Yeah?
Of course, hands are important. I use them to eat and to write and to do many, many things.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk, I use my hands quite a bit. Yes.
Me too, yeah. Well, you are fond of dreams just like I do, and you've been writing them down ever since you were in high school. What is the most remarkable dream you ever had, and how has that dream affected your life?
Well, you were talking about hands, and I read a book by Carlos Castaneda, the supposed sorcerer Don Juan Matus told him that if he looked at his hands before he fell asleep, he would have a lucid dream. He'd be awake and aware during the dream itself. And so I tried that. I looked at my hands a long time before going to sleep, and that night I actually did have a lucid dream. And I was on a train with a friend of mine, and the dream became lucid. And so I focused on my friend, and I had my friend lift up his hand and then lift up his other hand, and he didn't know why he was lifting up the hands. And he was very, very puzzled that the hands were moving without his permission. And then I broke down and I told him, well, this is a lucid dream, and I'm giving the commands to your hands. So this sort of showed me the number of ways that you can entertain yourself or instruct yourself during lucid dreams.
And
But
what was his response in the dream when you told him that?
when I told him that, then he practiced it too.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was influencing the movement of people sitting by him on the train, and their hands were moving, and they didn't know why they were moving. So he was enjoying their puzzlement, just like I had been enjoying his puzzlement.
Oh, wow. That's a good dream. What I've read your book about your life. You've had a wonderful life, but what was the most fulfilling period in your life until now?
Well, I don't live in the past. I'm trying to focus on the present.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say the projects I'm working with right now are the most important, the most exciting things in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually trying to finish a book about Rolling Thunder, the medicine man that I knew very well when he was alive.
Yeah.
His grandson and I did a book 3 years ago, and now the publisher has requested a second book, and so we hope that that will be out sometime early next year.
I hope so. Oh, that's fantastic. Wow.
And we collected many stories from people who have been influenced by Rolling Thunder, people that healed, or people who he has taught, or sometimes people who have contacted him in their dreams.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we have a great variety of stories coming out in that book about Rolling Thunder, the Native American medicine man.
Oh, that's good news. I was so impressed when you told that story about him with that bird that was brought to him with a broken wing. And he had that bird in his arms, I think, in his hands.
Yes,
and all of a sudden it flew away, healed.
I'll see if I the copy of that book. It should be back in the bookcase, the one with Rolling Thunder's picture on the cover. And then your viewers can actually see it. Yes, can you see it?
Yeah, we see it. Yeah.
Okay, now, the photographer who took the picture was seriously ill, and he was told he had less than 6 months to live. And medicine and hospitals had done everything that they could. So in desperation, he went out to see Rolling Thunder, and Rolling Thunder gave him a lot of herbs, did purification with sweat lodges, did many types of exercises with him for cleansing and for inner strength. And within 4 months, he was not dead. He was well. By 6 months, he was completely well.
Wow.
He was a photographer, but he didn't dare take Rolling Thunder's photograph because Rolling Thunder does not like his photograph taken. And sometimes people have tried to take his photograph and their camera's actually been not working. So during this period of time when the photographer, whose name was Carrie, was feeling very good, his friend brought a little eagle that had fallen out of the nest. And he said, I think this eagle has broken its wing. And the eagle was screaming and squawking and yelling. And we said, well, take this to Rolling Thunder. So they took the eagle to Rolling Thunder. All Rolling Thunder did was to touch the eagle and hold the eagle in his hands, and the eagle stopped squawking. And then Rolling Thunder said to Carrie, now you can take your photograph. And so Carrie took the photograph that ends up on the cover of the book.
Wow.
And a moment later, the little eagle just flew away back to the nest.
Yeah, that's magic.
Strong.
That's magic, yeah. Well, you just heard me talk about a dream image I had of you or somebody like you. You know, we are human beings are very good at making patterns, attaching images, and so I could have been mutual dreaming with you or just having a dream about the archetypical mentor. You are, for me, an archetypical mentor, but who were your mentors?
Oh, thank you. You're very kind. Because I've had many, many mentors myself in my life. And one of my mentors was Gardner Murphy, the famous American psychologist and past president of the American Psychological Association. And I worked as his teaching assistant at the University of Hawaii and kept in touch with him over the years, really up until the time of his death. And I've written a lot about him and learned a lot about what he called the biosocial theory of personality. That personality is a combination of one's biology, but also of one's social environment. And biology and the environment are always working together.
Yeah.
One of many things I learned from him.
Yeah. Yeah, and now they are discovering that it is indeed so with epigenetics. Yeah.
And I've had many, many other mentors. I've had many women mentors who have helped me a great deal. When I was at at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, Wisconsin, I had a wonderful psychology instructor, and she is the one who taught me psychological testing. And she is the one who advised me to go on to graduate school. I had not even considered graduate school until I talked with her. And I went out and worked in the public schools with handicapped children for 2 years. And then I applied for a scholarship at Northwestern University, which I received, and went on to get my master's and my PhD. And it was Dr. Gwen Arnold, who was a great mentor of mine, who stimulated me to do that.
Okay. Looking back on your life, what would you do differently?
What would I do differently? Many things. Many things. I have made many, many mistakes in my life. It's a wonder I'm still here, that I still survive. I, early in my life, planned to earn a lot of money by collecting postage stamps, first day covers, and autographs. So now I'm trying to sell them. I can't sell them. I focused on the wrong thing, and so obviously, back in those days, I should have maybe invested more in stocks and bonds, or collected coins. Coins sell much better than postage stamps do. So that's one mistake that I made, that I'm now suffering from, because I'm trying to make the sales and I cannot sell what I collected. I even collected autographed Time magazine covers, thinking those would bring in a lot of money.
Yeah.
2 of them sold, a lot of them did not sell. So that was one mistake that I can tell you about right off. Also, I made a very, very poor choice in terms of getting involved with some people who took more from me than what they gave to me. And so they have been a drag upon my life, and it had been better that I had rejected their friendship early on. So some of my personal choices have been mistakes. I think that I'm fortunate that I went into the career that I went into, because I've always been interested in psychology and always been very happy in psychology. So sometimes I make the right decision, and that was one of them.
What are the things that you are very, very content with?
Mistake I made just last week. I made so many mistakes I could tell the rest of the program about.
No. Let's talk about the things you did right.
A conference, and the last day of the conference, a volunteer drove me back to my hotel, and I was saying goodbye to her. I opened the door, not realizing that this was a bike lane. And as I opened the door, a bicycle ran right into the door, throwing this lovely young girl off the bicycle. She hit a friend of hers on another bicycle, who hit a friend on the third bicycle. And I looked out, and there were 3 mangled bicycles, 3 beautiful young women bleeding. And all because I had opened the door without looking. So now it might cost me thousands of dollars in repairs, because insurance will not cover things like this. So that's a very, very costly mistake.
Yeah.
And should I go on? I can tell you more mistakes.
No.
Thank heavens I do something right once in a while.
Well, what would you do the same, and why?
Pardon me?
What would you do the same, and why?
As I say, I went into psychology. That was a very good decision. And I made a very good decision in terms of going to the University of Wisconsin, going to Northwestern universities. I had very good faculty members, very good professors. And so I really think that I have an outstanding education. Also, I think it was a good decision to start working with dreams early in my career, because this led to the immense satisfaction and knowledge I've gained, and also the joy I've gained from the International Association for the Study of Dreams. Mm-hmm. Also, I became involved in hypnosis very early in my career. And so I just returned from the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis, and my involvement in both dreams and hypnosis has made me many, many friends, has taught me a great deal personally, a great deal about human personality, and most important, a great deal about how to help people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is that your motivation? Your prior motivation to help people?
I always think about that in terms of my actions and activities, in terms of how this will help humanity, how this will decrease human suffering. Mm-hmm. And I think that's more important than anything else.
Yeah.
I think that love is more important than anything, and service is a very important component of love.
Okay, wow. That's so good. You travel the world like a wanderer. In what part of the world do you feel most at home, and why?
I feel very much at home just about every place I go, to tell you the truth. I'm lucky that when I get invited to a place, that I make friends easily, and they're generally very, very kind to me, very thoughtful to me. And so I have very, very pleasant memories of each one of the 100 countries that I've visited over the course of my lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's good.
I have to say that I'm very, very comfortable in the Netherlands. I like the people very much, and they're good conversationalists. They're very interesting to talk to. They're very practical. They're very down to earth. They're very direct. They don't hold things back. They are very tolerant. They have a lovely society, and they have beautiful cultural history. And there's always something interesting in terms of museums, in terms of ballet, in terms of theater, in terms of landscape, in terms of nature, to see, to do in the Netherlands.
I was laughing with Bob van der Kastel at our last cyber meeting. Unfortunately, he has deceased since then. But he was saying to me, I did some research, and Dutch people are the most peaceful on earth, and that's because they always smoke pot. And I said, well, we do a lot more than that. And he said, well, I don't know. I said, well, you come to the Netherlands and we'll go Dutch on the joints. But for the rest, we are very, very intelligent people. And he typed back, because we were having this conversation at the cyber conference. He typed back, now I'm laughing off my chair. Now we'll go Dutch on the joints.
Well, of course, I can remember back when I was very young how I would be marveled to see pictures in the newspaper of Queen Wilhelmina riding her bicycle through the streets. And also, during the Second World War, when the Nazis occupied the Netherlands, how the royal family, most of the royal family actually stayed to be with the people and help out the people, and encouraged perseverance and patience, and actually that paid off. And even though some of the most bitter, bloodiest battles were fought in the Netherlands during the liberation of Europe, the Dutch pulled through. The Dutch are very, very resilient people.
Yeah, thank you. Of all the indigenous people you met, which which culture appealed to you most?
Well, I have worked with a number of indigenous groups over the years, and I have never I've never received a financial grant to do work with indigenous people. I've done it simply all on my own. But there are many groups that are especially interesting. One of them, actually, in the former Dutch colony of Indonesia, in the island of Sulawesi, at the very top of the island, there's a tribe called the Tanya Toraja. Mm-hmm. And they have very, very interesting traditions which they've maintained throughout the years, and they have resisted a lot of religious domination from Christian groups, although it's possible that some of them have blended the traditions with their version of Christianity and of Islam, because a lot of Muslims in Indonesia. It's actually the largest Muslim country in the world. But the Tanya Tarajans have taken a little bit of Islam, a little bit of Christianity, and yet they've remained true to their own traditions, which involve a lot of parties, a lot of ceremonies. And I was actually there for a funeral, and the funeral didn't take place until they had enough money to give the departed elder a huge party with buffalo meat and with vegetables and with fruits and with barbecues. And people even got very beautiful fabrics during the party. And I thought, well, that's quite a send-off. That's really remarkable. But then I went to a similar party in British Columbia, Canada. The Northwest Indian tribes of Canada have what they call a potlatch, which is a giveaway. And the chief of one of their tribes had died, and it took them 3 years to pull all of the material together to have a ceremony. And the ceremony went on for 5 days. It started at noon. It lasted until 4 o'clock in the morning. And they put on beautiful mythological reenactments of their own mythology. And the artwork of the Kwakiutl tribe, of the Salish tribe, is remarkable. And there it was on the masks of the performers. And I actually got something myself, which is in the office. Steve, will you bring the drum, please? And I'll tell you the story about how I got this very, very beautiful hand-painted drum.
Wow.
Yes, this is a drum.
Oh, wow.
See it?
Yeah.
Yeah, showing the gods of the oceans and all of the creatures in the gods' domain.
It's beautiful.
And if any of your listeners would like to buy a copy, let me know. I can put you in touch with the artist, and he will do a hand-painted drum just for them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not cheap, but they are worth a lot of money in museums and antique shops. But I was interested in the ceremonies, and I asked who was the director, who was the coordinator, and they introduced me to the coordinator, who actually is the artist who made the drum. And I found out from him that he had quite a story, and I've written his story in one of my books on post-traumatic stress disorder, not using his real name, because when he was a young boy, he was living with his grandparents. His parents had both died, and there was a rule at that time that he had to go to school. There were no public schools in his area. He had to go to a parochial school and learn from the nuns and the priests. His first night at the school, he was crying and sobbing because he missed his grandparents so much. And so the next day, the priest took him into his office and said, "I hear you were crying last night." And the little boy said, "Yes, I missed my grandparents." And the priest says, "We have to toughen you up." And the little boy came back to the class, and his pants were filled with blood because the priest had raped him. And everybody in the room was laughing because the same thing had happened to them. He told his grandparents wouldn't believe him. So he had a sexual and physical and emotional abuse from priests and nuns for 8 years. And finally, he got into public school, and then he just broke loose. He became an alcoholic. He became a drug dealer. He went to jail. Finally, he got into Alcoholics Anonymous. That straightened him out. And then one of his classmates, in the meantime, had become a lawyer. And as a lawyer, he started to sue the parochial schools that had abused the children in Canada. And there is now a fund in Canada of $3 billion And this goes to the victims of that abuse. The man that made me the drum was at the highest level of abuse, level 4. So he got enough money to buy a fishing boat. So he now makes his money fishing. And he worships the gods of his native religion. He says, I've had enough of Christianity to last for this lifetime. I'm going back to my native religion, and that's the nature religion that you see pictured on the drum. Wow. So this is why he directs these beautiful tableaus and keeps the mythology of the Native American people alive in his part of Canada. Mm-hmm. So I could tell you many stories like that because I've had a lot of encounters with Indigenous people, mm-hmm. and I've gotten some remarkable gifts, both physical gifts and emotional gifts from them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we've gotten to know each other a little bit better because I asked you to go to Utrecht to give a workshop on personal mythology. And can you tell us a bit more about the importance of discovering your own personal mythology?
Well, yes, I'd be happy to. And of course, your mythology is your belief system, mm-hmm. what you believe in, what directs your life. I use the word myth because myth is a little broader. It goes much deeper. It goes into the unconscious. It goes into the collective unconscious. And it also gets into the family unconscious. All of those are part of a person's mythology or belief system. And what we need to do to run our lives efficiently is to decide what belief has priority. Okay, you have a choice to make. Is this a choice that affects me? If so, how does it affect my family? How does it affect my community? How does it affect humanity as a whole? How does it affect nature? And you make your choice based on what your own belief system is, what your own priorities are. And as you know, in the workshop, people write down some of their personal myths, and then they consider each myth and decide if this is a myth I want to keep with me, or is this a myth that has outworn its usefulness and I need to throw away? Like some people carry around guilt with them, shame with them, which was imposed upon them when they were young, and they become too self-critical, and they become too loaded down with guilt really to lead a happy and joyous life. And so in the workshops, we try to liberate people from some of those negative feelings so that they can accept their lifestyle, accept their mistakes, accept their imperfections, and have fun, manifest love, live with nature, live with humanity, live with spirit, and get on with whatever brings them joy and satisfaction in their life.
Mm-hmm. Yes. On Facebook, I have a group, Personal Mythology. So if any of you listeners want to join, you're very welcome. But we also discuss things. And one of the things we discuss is there really no worldwide mythology? Because it's a very appealing thought that we are all one. We came from the same substance. There was an evolution, and everything is connected. So why not why not a global mythology? But in our workshop, you said no. There's no a global mythology. Can you explain that?
It would be wonderful if there were a global mythology.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful. And I think that the closest thing we have to a global mythology is actually the evolutionary process.
Yeah.
This is why people are connected with other forms of life.
Yeah.
This is why we have to be at one with our environment and preserve the environment. And this is also why people have to learn how to get along with each other. It's the ethnic and religious mythologies that divide us, that pit people against each other, that cause the religious wars, the ethnic wars, the political wars. And so much money is going to fighting, so much money is going to buying weapons and making weapons. We don't have enough money to preserve nature, to clean the oceans, to clean the air, to grow more trees, plant more flowers. So the absence of a global mythology is really something that is impacting our lives negatively.
Yeah.
Like I say, yes, it'd be wonderful if people would realize we're all one and if they would honor those connections. We haven't gotten there yet, and I hope we get there before it's too late.
Yeah, me too. You've worked with for a period of 10 years with Montague Ullman, doing experiments and ESP, telepathy, dream work. What was the most stunning experiment?
Well, I think that our whole body of work has been quite stunning, quite unexpected.
Yeah.
And I've written about it with my colleagues, especially Montague Ullman, in a number of books, a number of articles, and people can actually go to my website, stanleykrippner.weebly.com, and they can read a number of those articles. Of course, they're, for the most part, all in English, but Dutch are so marvelously bi or trilingual that won't hold them back. And I would say that that one of the most remarkable experiments was one night that we did with Chester Carlson, who invented the Xerox machine. And he wanted to learn about our work, and so we hooked him up with electrodes. And before he went to sleep, we had a stack of envelopes, each one containing a different picture. And by throwing dice, we randomly pulled one of the envelopes and put it in a distant room and said, now that's the envelope that you're going to dream about tonight. You're going to look into that envelope and dream about the picture. So that night, he had a very strange series of dreams, unlike dreams he had ever had before, because they were dreams of boxes, of buildings, of geometrical forms. And then in the morning, we showed him 6 pictures and said, now, pick the one of the pictures that comes closest to your dreams. And he chose a picture called, by Giorgio de Chirico, the famous Italian surrealist artist. And it was a picture of boxes and cubes and buildings that matched his dream. So he was so impressed that he gave us a lot of money, and we continued our research for a couple of extra years.
Wow.
Yes, that was the good news. The bad news is we had an appointment with him to maybe get more money and continue our research. And before he came to see us, he went to a movie theater. He had a heart attack while watching the movie. He died. We never had the meeting. We ran out of money and our laboratory closed.
Oh my gosh.
Up in California at Saybrook University, Montague Ullman went to Sweden to work with dreams with Swedes. He also used his dream technique in other parts of Europe. And Chuck Honorton, our other experimenter, went to New Jersey to continue work there. But the lack of money is what brought our dream experiments to a close.
Yeah.
Like I say, we did work very hard for 10 years. We produced a number of experiments. And sometimes they worked out, sometimes they didn't. But people can try to repeat them if they want. And some laboratories to this day are still trying to use the same system that we've used to see if people can dream about a distant picture or even a future picture.
Yeah. Well, tell us about your Grateful Dead experiment with the picture that was used for telepathy.
Well, for many years, I've been a friend of the Grateful Dead's, and the Grateful Dead rock group, who some of your audience might have seen during one of their tours of Europe, actually suggested that we do an experiment because there were going to be 6 nights in the same place, Port Chester, New York. And so we arranged a experiment where we had 2 slides for each night. And at the last minute, one slide would be chosen, again, by throwing dice, and put into a slide projector and flashed on the screen in front of the audience with the instructions that they were supposed to send that image to Brooklyn to the Maimonides Medical Center Dream Laboratory. And the Grateful Dead members, Bill Kreutzmann, Mickey Hart, Bob Weir, Jerry Garcia, Phil Lesh, would talk about the picture, and the people in the audience would try to send it to the people in Brooklyn, and 4 out of times they succeeded.
Wow.
Yes, it was quite a remarkable feat in terms of statistics. It was just barely statistically significant. There were so few nights involved.
Yeah.
I can remember one night the picture was a Armenian artist by the name of Skralian, and he had painted a body with the 7 spinal chakras, all in the different colors. Now that was flashed on the screen. And so the participant in a dream laboratory had one dream about a person with an energy body. He had a dream about the human spinal cord, and he had another dream about people going through a spiritual class and learning about spiritual transformation. So when we had our matching by the outside judges, that certainly was a very, very easy match for them to make.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why was it that hundreds of people in the audience were able to have such an impact? Well, who knows? Maybe it would have worked just as well with a dozen people. At that time of the night, and at that time of the youth culture, many people had been smoking marijuana, and maybe they were aided by getting high to send the picture. Others are getting high just from the music itself. And it's never been done since, so at this point, we really don't know the answer to that. But you know, that was such a small study. It was a pilot study, and yet it's gotten more attention than any of the other studies we've done. We published it, and you ask about mistakes I've made? Yes, I got 100 reprints. I should have had members of the Grateful Dead sign those reprints. They would be worth thousands of dollars today.
Yeah.
It didn't pass my mind. I didn't even think of it.
Yeah. Mm.
Somebody brought a copy for me to sign, and I'm not famous at all. I signed it. He sold it to the Sotheby's auction house for $300 just for my signature.
Mm.
Yeah, so again, that was a big mistake not to have members of the Grateful Dead sign the extra copies, and I'd be rich and I'd be retired by now.
Oh, okay.
But you know, you have to learn how to accept your mistakes.
Yeah.
This is part of my personal mythology. You just have to learn from the mistakes, put those behind you, not get stuck in the past, but live in the present and look to the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You have that extraordinary combination of a sharp analytical skill with diplomacy and gentleness. Is that an innate quality, or did you develop that? And if it's innate, is it more related to your mother or to your father? And if it's learned, what experiences have taught you this?
Well, you called me gentle. What else did you call me?
I called you diplomatic. You are gentle diplomatic, and you are sharp analytical. You are quite famous for having a photographic memory and a sharp analytical mind.
Oh, I wish I did have a photographic memory. I forget things all the time. As I'm older, I don't think I have a photographic memory anymore. Maybe at one time I did, but not anymore. But you talk about a quality of gentleness. Well, I believe in being kind. I think that one thing we're lacking in the world, people are not kind enough to each other. And I think that any advice that I would give would simply be a little kinder to the people around you. And at the same time, I'm very much of a fighter. I don't let people walk over me. When I believe in something and I see that it's being endangered, I will fight for it. And that's where this sharpness comes in, because I'm very much aware of when somebody is trying to take advantage of me or somebody else, and I do not let them get away with it. Now, both my mother and my father are what you would call gentle people, but they were both very strong people as well. They had to be. We lived on a farm. The winters were very cold. We had hard work to do. We had crops to raise. We had cattle to feed. We had to make do in rough times. Remember that I was born in the Great Depression in the United States. So after the Great Depression came the Second World War, and the first group of soldiers going off to the war came from our community. And so I was brought up in wartime as well. And so there was rationing. The food was cut down, nothing like what was going on in the Netherlands and Nazi-occupied Europe, of course. But still, it was a life of hardship. And then, of course, when the war ended, then I was pretty well into school, and things changed very drastically and dramatically.
Okay, thank you for answering that. You have been in a terrible accident in Spain with a truck, causing you a lot of harm. Have you had a warning dream about that prior to that happening? Because I can imagine that with all your dreaming skills, you could have picked up on something like that, and after this happened, you said, that dream, that was a warning.
Well, I've actually been in a number of accidents in my life. I have all sorts of scars on my body. I have metal implants in my body. It's a wonder I'm still able to function. But I've survived. I've pulled through. When I was in an accident in Spain, I was hit by a car that went through a red light, and it broke 7 bones, and I have metal implants holding my wrist together, holding my leg together, and I had a brain concussion. I bled all over the place. But, I pulled through, and I used a lot of self-hypnosis. I used a lot of self-regulation strategies. I did my best to survive and to keep functioning. I used a lot of physical exercise, used a lot of yoga. So I use all the skills I'm capable of doing. No, I did not have a dream predicting that. If I did have a dream, I didn't remember it. However, I did have a dream one night when I was in New York City about to give a lecture at a convention on healing of all things. And I had a dream that there was an x-ray taken, and people said, look at this x-ray, and you will see that the person has an ulcer that has come open and it's bleeding. And I said, what's the name of the person? And they said, oh, it's Stanley Krippner. Well, that morning, I went to the bathroom and I was passing blood, so I checked myself into the hospital. I couldn't go to the healing conference. Instead, everybody was healing me. They were praying for me, sending energy. And indeed, a ulcer had broken open, and I was in the hospital, and it was something that they took care of right away. But the dream sort of indicated to me what I was going to discover a few hours later. Dream reflects a lot of what's going on in your body. And one of my students at Saybrook University right now is actually studying dreams that people have about physical health and about their physical conditions, and is making a collection of this type of dream.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, I did some work in translating theory of dreams myself. Lots of hours of, I can't hold it good for the camera. Lots of hours, lonely hours behind the computer, trying to make sense of the wonderful work of a Russian psychiatrist, Vasily Kasatkin. So I know those dreams about health are always, luckily, always very direct. And I think I could explain that to myself because of the thing you said about trauma. When there is a trauma to the body or a trauma coming to the body, symbolism ceases in dreams, and it just becomes very straightforward. And that's one thing about healing dreams or warning dreams about your health, that they usually are very straightforward about the body part that is injured and about the type of injury you get, and the type of knowledge the dreaming person has. So a doctor will dream more specifically about for example, what type of bacteria has been aggravating him.
Well, I have to congratulate you on translating Vasily Kasatkin's book into Dutch. There's no translation in English, by the way. My student wants to use Kasatkin's work. There are 2 brief excerpts from the book that have been translated into English, but you'll have to learn how to read Russian or Dutch to read the entire book, I'm afraid.
Yes, but my translation is in English, but I only translated a part of it because of finances. It took me such a long time, and I wanted to make sure that the whole book was translated, but it would have taken up almost a year. So I quit when I translated. I translated, I think, 5 chapters.
Well, that's remarkable. Yes,
so they are welcome to the book. I'll send you a link for them to use.
Fine. If your readers don't know who Kasatkin was, he did his collection during the siege of Leningrad during the Second World War. And of course, I was alive at the time. I remember it well. The Nazis had surrounded Leningrad for almost 2 years. And the citizens of Leningrad were dying like flies. They had nothing to eat. They were eating the animals from the zoos. They were eating grass. They were even making soup out of mud. It was a terrible time for the Russians in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, but they were steadfast. They were resilient. They held fast. The Nazis never took Leningrad, even though they tried to break through the siege several times. When I was in St. Petersburg, my friends took me to the bunkers that surrounded the city where the Russian troops were holding off the Nazis. And so I had a chance, actually, to be in that historic spot myself. That's one of the great sagas of the Second World War. And then, of course, the composer Dmitri Shostakovich was working as an air raid warden at the time in Leningrad and was doing his patriotic bit. And, of course, he later wrote a symphonic composition in honor of the survivors of Leningrad.
Yeah, it's like Ralph Metzer said in a previous interview about Russia. There's no messing with the bear. You shouldn't mess with the bear of Russia.
Absolutely, right.
Yeah. And finally, the final question of our interview, and I'm so grateful to have seen you, to have talked with you again. What advice would you give to students starting out in psychology?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. And if students are listening to your show, what I would advise them to do is, first of all, to get very, very well grounded in whatever psychological discipline they're involved in, and keep aware of future trends, and don't think your education is over when you get your degree. You have to keep going to workshops. You have to keep reading journals. Much of what I was taught when I was in psychology classes was wrong. I was told, for example, that we had a certain number of brain cells, and when they went, they were gone forever, and the brain could never recover from injury. Now we know that the brain is very plastic, that we can generate new brain cells, that we can train areas of the brain to take over from areas that are injured. All of that material is contradicted by what I was taught when I was in college. Also, one of my faculty members said, people dream in black and white. If people dream in color, that's a sign they're schizophrenic. My friends and I were horrified because we'd all been dreaming in color. So sometimes there's not only new information that you have to keep aware of, there's new information that contradicts what you learned, and you have to, make that correction in terms of your own knowledge. So that's why it's so important to be very critical, be a critical thinker when you're a student, and to weigh evidence and to keep in touch with the trends in whatever area of psychology you're going into. Psychotherapy has changed immensely over the years. When I was at the university, psychoanalysis and psychodynamic psychotherapy were very, very hot topics. Well, then I went to a American Psychological Association meeting, and I heard a lecture by Albert Ellis, the founder of cognitive behavioral therapy. I thought, well, this changes psychotherapy forever.
Yeah.
And it did. So thank heavens I went to conventions, I kept up with my reading, and especially in the field of dreams, so much has been discovered since I was in college that I would be completely out of touch if I had not been kept informed and went to conferences, read journals, talked with colleagues. And so this would be my advice. Keep current, anticipate future trends, and don't fall behind in terms of your reading and your conference going and your continuing education.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Krippner. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. It's a pleasure, Suzanne. Always a pleasure to see you virtually or in person. I'll say hello to the fellow dreamers from you. I certainly will.
Okay. Yes. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.